Welcome back to Comicstorian for part 2 of Iron Man, the first book of Korvac. Last time, Tony Stark and Patsy Walker found themselves fighting against Korvac and his villain followers. Korvac easily dispatched Tony and Patsy, and that's how we got to where we are today. If you're wondering where you are at the Comicstorian channel, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and break them down into digestible bites before reading them dramatically back to you. I'm your narrator, Dan, and let's jump in to the second part of the first book of Korvac. Patsy sits in Tony's brownstone, staring at the wall, but she can hear the voice now. The same voice as the others that follow Korvac. Outside, reporters are asking Tony questions, wondering whether he is looking for James Rhodes, who has gone missing. Tony walks into the room, glancing at his friend. "Patsy, are you all right?" he asks. She looks up as if she didn't even notice him, and says that she's fine. He nods, telling her that Korvac is probably still hunting them. "Of course, after he figured out he didn't kill us," she says. Tony tells her about Rhodey's kidnapping, which means I can't go to anyone for help or let on that anything's wrong. Otherwise, Rhodey's dead, he continues. But Patsy is angry with Tony, revealing the electric burns on her face. Tony promises her that he will handle the problem. "You think you need to do this alone?" Patsy points out. Tony nods. "It's too dangerous to bring in help. I can't risk Rhodey," he tells her. But Patsy thinks that Tony wants to keep things quiet because he's afraid people will blame him for funding Korvac. She finally apologizes and points out that her face hurts and she's in a bad mood. The two make up and finally embrace, beginning to kiss as they fall to the bed. Elsewhere, Rhodey looks up at Korvac and his disciples. Unicorn enters the church and informs Korvac that they have discovered the location of Ta-2. "The ship of Galactus?" Rhodey asks, fighting through the mind-control drugs that they have given him. Korvac steps forward and explains that his destiny lies with the Ta-2. "Galactus doesn't take kindly to visitors," Rhodey gasps. But Korvac isn't scared, and orders his disciples to prepare for his ascension to demigodhood. Later, Tony and Patsy are laying in bed, with Tony admitting that she's right and he needs help. It has to be someone Korvac wouldn't be tracking or even be aware of. That means no Avengers, no Fantastic Four, none of Xavier's people. This has to be quiet, no noise at all, he says. But Patsy doesn't respond for a moment. And after Tony prods her, she finally admits to being able to hear Korvac's voice in her head. "It's maybe a soft whisper. I thought it was just ringing in my hearing since Oklahoma, but it's getting louder," she says. She looks at him with concern in her eyes. "Something's happening," she whispers. At the church, the machine is prepared. Korvac's disciples strap him in and activate it, sending bolts of electricity coursing through his body. Elsewhere, Patsy and Tony are walking through the streets of New York, armed with a list of potential heroes that might be able to help them. "This list is pretty thin," Tony notes. But Patsy suddenly falls to her knees, screaming as Korvac's voice bellows in her ears. Tony moves to help her, but they both look up as New York is plunged into darkness. "That's not good," Tony says. Patsy looks up. "Ta-2. He wants to go to Ta-2, she whispers. In the church, the villainous disciples watch as Korvac rises up, now glowing with energy. "I am forever!" the demigod bellows. Tony and Patsy have headed to the underground racers, hoping to enlist Halcyon's aid in fighting the low-rank heroes. The racer signs to Tony, pointing out that he isn't a criminal. "Look, right now, you're the closest thing to an underground that I've got," Tony tells him. They both whirl as energy begins to crackle around Patsy, and she begins to rise into the air. She speaks, but now it is Korvac's voice that comes from her lips. "Don't try to stop me, Stark," she says before sending an energy blast into a nearby car. "That's bad. That's really bad," Tony whispers. He tries to get through to Patsy, but she can't hear him. Luckily, Halcyon remains calm and walks over to a nearby fire hydrant. He cracks it open and douses Patsy with water, throwing her to the ground. Tony looks at him in shock. "Long story, I'm a mutant. Weird power, but my heart rate doesn't go above 70 BPM, Halcyon signs. "You know that list I gave you? Put yourself on it," Tony tells him. Later, Tony puts on his armor and walks into the room to greet his new team. "Okay, sorry there's no coffee or donuts, but I don't have time for the usual pleasantries. And full transparency, you're all I could find on such short notice," he tells those who are gathered. Gargoyle, Scarlet Spider, Misty Knight, and Frogman all look at him. "This is the best day of my life," Frogman says with glee. Tony motions to Halcyon and thanks him for tracking down the heroes. After taking a long drink of water, he fills those who have gathered on everything that's happened, including Korvac kidnapping Rhodey, turning himself into a demigod, and his plans to get Galactus's world ship. He reaches down and pulls on his helmet. My guess is he wants the power cosmic. Last time, he essentially became a god, and we couldn't stop him. "Questions?" Tony asks as he looks at the group. Scarlet Spider raises his hand. "How do we stand a chance?" he asks. Tony shakes his head and tells them that he doesn't have a clue. "My advice, do as I say. Then and only then can we hope to stop Korvac," he says. They all look at him quietly and turn away. "I need you all to get to work right now," he says. In her room, Patsy is trying to cover her ears to block out Korvac's voice. But when she opens her eyes, she is standing outside in the rain, with Corvac standing before her. "Patsy, how I feel you've suffered. How you're still tormenting. When I make all things one, your torment will vanish. I will free the world," he tells her. Hellcat glares at him. "Maybe go f*** yourself," she says. She whirls and punches an electrical box, shocking herself and dropping to the ground. Korvac walks forward and reaches down for her, stroking the side of her face. "Ignorance. Such fearful ignorance. Suffer then. Feel every bit of your fear," he whispers to her. But Tony isn't far away, scanning for Patsy's signal in the rainy city. In their headquarters, the new team is hard at work, with Misty using her contacts to learn that there is a massive radiation signature coming from a warehouse in the Bronx. Halcyon looks to them and signs that that kind of power output has to be an engine of some kind. Frogman comes into the room. "Guys, Hellcat's gone," he tells them. But Tony has already located her. He flies to her signal, waking her up gently. "You okay? I'm sorry. I used you as bait. I knew you'd still be susceptible to him. I knew he'd draw you out," he says as he helps her up. Patsy is babbling, not making any sense as she looks at Tony with fear in her eyes. "What did he do to you?" Tony questions. "I'm dead. My soul is dead. I am, she continues to say. Tony pulls her into a hug. "Patsy, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let him near you. You're gonna be all right," he tells her. The comms suddenly come to life as Misty informs Tony of the possible location for an off-planet engine. "Wait for me to make your move, and Misty, be careful," Tony warns her. Tony looks up as the door opens in the alley and several people come running out. "There's a man with a bomb inside!" someone shouts as they run past Tony. He lowers Patsy back to the ground and tells her that he has to go. She looks at him with fear. "I will be right back, I promise," he tells her. Tony walks away and enters the laundromat. He finds Corvac leaning against one of the machines. "There you are, the hero," Corvac says with sarcasm. Iron Man stalks forward. "No bomb then?" he asks. Korvac shakes his head. "Of course not. I don't want anyone to get hurt," he says. Korvac explains that he just wants to take over the universe and make it a safe place for everyone. Tony isn't buying it though, but their conversation is interrupted as Misty comes over the comms again, telling Tony that they've arrived at the warehouse and have found Korvac's ship. The group of lower tier heroes enter the ship and find that it is empty. Tony's eyes widen in fear as he realizes what's happening. "Misty, get out of there now!" he shouts. The warehouse explodes, shaking the ground even where Tony and Korvac are standing. Tony falls to his knees, trying to get someone to answer the comms. Korvac steps forward and puts a hand on Tony's shoulder. "You're misguided, Stark. You like to think that you should be in charge. But the truth is, you're just an upright worm. You'd better leave matters that you're not suited for in more capable hands," Korvac says. Tony bellows in anger and looks up at Korvac, blasting him with all of the energy in his suit. As the smoke clears, the suit begins to fail, and Tony falls to the ground. But Korvac stands back up, his clothes and half of his face burned away, revealing the android beneath. "Was that it? Was that everything?" he asks. He walks forward, kicking Tony so that the man falls over. "Your suit is completely spent. I'm sorry, Tony, but I promise you, it will all be beautiful," Korvac says, stepping on Iron Man's neck and snapping it, before turning to walk away, leaving Tony collapsed on the ground, unable to follow him. And that brings us to the conclusion of Christopher Cantwell's Iron Man, Volume 1, the first book of Korvac. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to give it a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you click that bell icon to get the notifications turned on, because we learned that YouTube is not sending notifications to many people, and let's be honest, you don't want to miss the amazing videos that we have on this channel. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time with Volume 2 of Iron Man.